Well, welcome to the English podcast from English. Yes, welcome to the English podcast with Tommy. My name is Tommy, and this is my podcast. This morning is my first day back in the podcast saddle and at work for over 3 weeks. Can you believe it? 3 weeks of doing nothing but being on holiday. And the first thing at 8 o'clock I've got is not a lesson, it's a podcast. And it's with a wonderful woman who has more energy than my three kids all put together. And she is at the moment in Asturias in northern Spain. I'd like to welcome on her podcast debut, Trisha Horton.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It's good to see you this
It's nice to see
morning.
you, and I'm so happy that I'm here.
I'm glad that we made this happen because when I wrote to you on holiday, you didn't know that I was on holiday. And then you wrote to me, "Oh, my apologies, you're on holiday." I was like, "Oh, I don't mind. On holiday, I also work." Call it sort of mental stimulation while trying to, occupy three kids so that they don't completely run riot. I needed some sort of mental stimulation. I needed someone to talk to. I needed something to do in my life. So I decided, well, Trisha has been waiting for a long time to come on the podcast. And I thought, why not bring her on immediately at 8 o'clock on the very first day that you're back at work? Why not?
Awesome.
It's a great idea. And I'm really happy that I really I'm really happy that you come here.
Well, I'm happy to be here.
That's great.
And I like the early morning. I'm an early bird. The early bird gets the worm.
I can't do that. Not all the time.
Well,
Not
you're
all the
doing it
time.
now. I
I'm
hope you've
doing it
had your
now.
coffee.
Uh, tea, tea,
Okay,
tea
okay,
with
tea.
lemon. I'm a tea
Tea.
man, British. Um, Trisha, before we dive straight into your wonderful 10 points of one that you've given me, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So, I like to be able to say that I'm fluent and bilingual in Spanish, but it did not happen overnight. It happened, I started at the age of 14, and it took me 12 years to say to myself, I am bilingual now. And it took a long time. It's not like this, it's not overnight success. It's continuity, it's determination, it's nights of tears because you're reading a novel in Spanish and you don't understand anything and you have to look up every single word. And this was before the mobile phone with the dictionary. This is a real dictionary with real pages that you open up. And I found that as I studied and read and things like that with a novel in Spanish. I did that. That was my major. I majored in philology, Spanish philology, and I had to read a lot of books. There were moments that I realized that if a word occurred three times, then it was an important word.
Yeah,
But if it only happened once, just disregard it because it wasn't that important. And that's now what I teach my students is if it happens three times, look it up because you need it. And it works. I mean, I'm kind of when I teach, uh, based on how I learned Spanish, that's how I'm trying to teach because it's consistency.
yeah,
And that's, my first point that I was going to speak about. It's you need to do it every day. You have to immerse yourself into the zone for at least 15 minutes.
yeah,
No interruptions, no dog, no kids, no, oh, I need to make dinner. No, sit down with your notebook and do something in English, total immersion.
yeah,
So at least you've been accountable
yeah,
and you've had firsthand that day with English.
yeah, exactly. I'm just going to rewind the tape right to the beginning. When I asked you, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, I really didn't do that,
So
did
you didn't really, you sort of skipped the part where you're from. You said,
Okay.
Yeah, I know it's okay. Not everyone wants
I
to
get
talk.
excited.
Go on.
Okay, so I'm from Virginia, the United States,
Yeah.
and I studied in the United States. Um, at 14, I decided I wanted to learn Spanish. I loved it. I had listened to some music, and now I don't listen to Spanish music, but I loved it at the time.
Okay.
It was really my only way of learning Spanish because there was no internet.
Yeah.
I had records and
What?
LPs, and that's how I learned the sound.
Yeah.
And then I had some cassettes and things like that, but I had no I had no tools. There was nothing available. There was the local library and it had very basic Berlitz kind of learning tools, and that was it. So nowadays, I think people are saturated with so much that they don't know how to decide, whereas I didn't have much.
Exactly. Uh,
Nobody in my family speaks Spanish,
yeah.
so
I'm looking at you and I think you did not live in the time of the records. You did not live in the time
I
of records.
did.
No, you did
Oh,
not. You
yes,
do
I
not
did.
look a day older than 16, honey. So let's keep it there. Let's keep it right there. Let's keep it here and right now, because I can't see you being someone who lived during the record period. However, let me just put this out there. If you're 16, that makes me 120. Because I love doing
You're
that.
so sweet.
I
So
love doing that.
sweet.
I love doing that. I can't help myself at times. I'm someone who my inner self says I'm sweet little 16,
Oh,
but out
yeah.
but out here it doesn't look like sweet little
No,
16 at
I'm
all.
18. I'm not 16, I'm 18.
Oh, you're 18. Okay. All right. All right. We'll leave it there.
So, a little more about me. Let's see. I decided to study Spanish. I went to college in the United States, university in the United States. And then I moved to Spain, and then I got my master's degree in Spain to teach English. So, yeah. I've got a son. He's 22.
Oh, wow. Okay. If you're 18 and he's 22, that makes that makes
And
okay.
I just think languages are really important. So, as his mother tongue was going to be English and Spanish, I decided to get him into German.
Yeah. You got him into German.
I
Wow.
did.
That is amazing. So your son is now a multilingual person, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Um, anyone who doesn't know anything about me, I have three kids of my own between the ages of 6 and 9, two mother tongues, English and German. And, one eventually they're going to get the third language as well, which is my mother tongue, Hungarian, but that's later on in life. I hope that they would embrace it later in life. But let's go into your topic, which is your
Yeah.
guide to your guide to doing things, because you have it all over your Instagram profile as well. The guides, you walking around in the sunny parks and in your raincoats and hair tied up, and you got a microphone right next to you. You got your camera right in front of your face, and I feel like you've got more energy than my three kids put together doing this. And every single time you're doing this, it always jumps from one scene of you walking through a park, then you end up in a room, then you go back to a park, then you end up back in a room, then you end up back in a park, or you walk around somewhere else. And I think to myself, I can't keep up with you. You're too good. You're too good for this. You're too good at this. But you said a little earlier about consistency, about intensity, about the 10 to 15 minutes daily. There are lots of learners who I know, including myself, when it comes to Spanish, that we cannot put together that 15 minutes daily, that we can only manage to put the 1 hour in during a class time and maybe 5 minutes after a class if we have that 5 minutes. What would you say to those sort of people, including myself, who are the unfortunate people who can't afford to put that 10 to 15 minutes of work in every day?
Well, I think with concentration, we all have a problem with concentration, myself included. I am doing 50,000 things at once because I can't sit still. And yes, I have a lot of energy. I don't know where I get it from. I get excited about what I'm doing.
Yeah,
I do go to the gym. I do have pretty good diet, I would say. Um, but meditation helps.
yeah,
Today I got up and I didn't have an early class today. So I focused on myself. I got up at 6. I had my early morning meditation from 6 to 6:40.
mm,
First part is guided. The second part, I sat in silence and I could do it. It was really good. So that was good. And that helps with concentration. So if people can get up early and
yeah,
do that, this is before coffee or
yeah,
tea in your case. And then with your tea, enjoy your tea and study for
yeah.
15 minutes
15 minutes.
before the kids get up. That's what I'm saying is, and the reason I like the early morning is because nobody's up. It's quiet and I can hear the birds singing.
Yeah,
And that's amazing. I love that. And especially at this time of year because it's lighter out. So
yeah,
it's happy.
yeah,
Um, and if you can't get up early in the morning, then um, allocate some time somewhere, maybe coffee break if you can be quiet and put some of those noise reduction ear headphones on
yeah,
and 15 minutes with your English.
yeah.
Read the newspaper online, just
Definitely.
something that you're doing. But I really think that it has to be enjoyable, something that you like, that it's fun. It's like, oh God, I have to do English now. No, find something you like, whether it's about your favorite guitarist and I'm looking at your t-shirt, that's why.
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely,
But
definitely.
anything that you enjoy.
Yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
mean, when it comes to me in Spanish, we've had a history which goes back to my younger days when I was really 16 years old. Uh, I started off back at sixth form, when I was doing my A levels and went through, did it at university. After university, me and Spanish broke up. We never saw each other, we didn't see each other much. And then I got back in the saddle again. Why? Because I wanted to do it. I wanted to get back into it. I wanted to have a bit of fun with it. And I find my fun is by listening to music like you did with your records. Only I don't have a record player with Spanish records. I have something called YouTube. I have something called a YouTube record player,
Right.
which is quite good. It
Right.
works just as well as a record player, but and it's really interesting way of doing of learning music. I mean, I'm a big fan of music, always have been.
Yeah.
So when I get in the mood, I put a Spanish song on, listen to it with the
Right.
text, obviously, so I know what I'm reading. Obviously first try and get my head into the music, try and hear the sound of the words, etc.
Mm.
But once you get the lyrics out, then you actually realize, oh, he wasn't saying the B word, he was saying something else. He was saying something completely different. It's when we listen to songs, there are words that we overlook that we think, well, hang on, he's saying something that I didn't think didn't exist in the English language or in the language that we're learning. So I find music to be a wonderful way to connect people and to learn a language.
Yeah.
Um, your next point is talking to yourself, which for many people might sound sort of like the beginnings of dementia, but it's not that, is it?
Well, it keeps your thoughts organized. When you speak out loud, you're organizing things, you're structuring things.
Yeah,
The other day, I was practicing what I was preaching, and I was cooking, and I was alone, and I started speaking to myself in French. And when you get to a word that you don't know how to say, that's where the phone comes in really handy. You look it up. And if you don't know how to sound it out, you use Cambridge or Oxford Dictionary. They have a wonderful way of, the little speaker for the American and the British, which is great,
yeah,
really useful. And that's how you can learn vocabulary too. And write it down, write
Yeah,
it down. That's a way of studying too.
yeah. I mean, but when we write things down, I always say, I don't know whether you're the same as me, but I always say in context. Never writing a single word down. Always write the word down in context so that
Yeah.
you can see what that word means in that context. You said it at the beginning, at the top of the show. Um, if it happens three times or more, then it must be important. If it
Yeah.
only happens once, then it can't be that important.
Yeah.
But that three times, it might be in three different contexts rather than in one single context, right? And I'm going to try not to ask you a question while you're drinking because is that could end up becoming very messy. So when you have those words, that word or that phrase in these three different contexts, how do we get around that problem? Because you might have seen a word that is in one context, then you see it
Right.
but in a different context, and then you see it again in a completely different context. And that will confuse a lot of people because we're preaching here to write it down if
Yeah.
it three times or more. But those three times are three different contexts altogether. So how can we get around that problem that we might have?
Write it down the three times in the three different contexts if you're going to use it. If you're going to use it in that context, because maybe you would never, maybe it's for a doctor and you would never use that term in that situation.
Yeah.
But if you are a doctor, then yes, you need to use it. So it just depends. You have to be honest with yourself
Mm,
and categorize it, like, I don't know, it's a verb, and then you write it in this way, and this way.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Exactly. And repeating things out loud. When you say repeating things out loud, this is sort of coming from talking to yourself as well, isn't it? Because
Well,
while you're talking to yourself, you're repeating things that you've heard or you've seen, right?
absolutely. But like a lot of my students, when I correct them for a reason. And
Yeah,
it's for them to repeat it after me. And some people just let it go. And it's like, how are you going to feel when you say it out loud? If you don't say it out loud, it doesn't come naturally when you're not with me. So wouldn't it be better if you say it out loud after I've corrected you and then see if it's okay? See if the word flow went out right, because a lot of times the first time it doesn't come out right.
exactly.
So we have to separate two bits of the sentence and then let it flow together the second time. So say it in bits and
Yeah.
then put it all together.
Oh
And
wow.
that builds fluency.
Yeah, exactly. It's the jigsaw. It's the jigsaw. You have a word that you can't pronounce, and you cut it down into the syllables.
Yeah.
So what I always say, I'm teaching German as a foreign language as well as English as a foreign language.
Wow.
I get to the point where at lower level, whether you're English learner or German learner, you're sort of thinking, oh, there's this really hard word that I cannot get out. Whatever I do, it really sounds stupid every time I say it. So I say, cut it down to those syllables. There used to be a word that I used to never be able to say at primary school, the word onomatopoeia.
Gosh, yeah.
And my teacher at school, she said, right, okay, so you can't pronounce it, cut it down.
Mhm.
Onomatopoeia. And that it really got stuck into my head, and I it got stuck there. And that's how I teach longer words. If I see a word that I can't myself pronounce, I always cut it down into syllables or into little bite-sized chunks.
Yeah.
Say, right, okay, when you're writing it down, write it in those chunks. Then you can see where the chunks are, how long the word is, where the chunks are, where the syllables end and where the next one ends. And then when you put the word back together, it will not sound onomatopoeia